welcome to your ILM Level 2 Award in Leadership and Team Skills. So this is your first unit, Unit 268, Leading Your Team. A couple of housekeeping points before we get going. Before you start with this, and certainly before you start writing your assignments, can I please ask you to make sure you've looked at the plagiarism and citation videos which are in the course documents section above. This will make sure that you're up to date and you know how to record and cite things if you're referencing them in your assignments going forwards. Don't want to need to be returning anything because of plagiarism, so hopefully that will avoid that problem. So for your first unit, for leading the team, key things to recognise here, there's a couple of documents which will help you. There's the course handbook, which will have your mark schemes detailed in there, so you can see how you're going to be assessed. And just for your reference, that's what those will look like. Okay, so you can have a look at those and see what you're going to be assessed. And also your assignments are in the workbook, which is part of this unit. And there's just one assignment for this, and it goes through, details your task, and then also here the individual criteria and the marks available for each. So those two documents need to be read alongside this presentation. Two key objectives to achieve with this unit then. The first one is understanding the difference between leadership and management. And the second one, as it says, is looking at a range of leadership styles. So that's a little bit more theoretical. Their benefits and potential and impacts on individual and team performance. And within that, quite a few of those units are looking at reflections of your leadership styles within that and how they have affected a team that you've been leading or are certainly a member of. So let's start with the first assessment criteria. So assessment criteria 1.1 is explain the difference between leadership and management. Now I think it's worth noting at this point with all of these assessment criteria, please be aware that you need to look at the command word. That will give you some idea of how much detail you need to be putting into each question and each answer that you're writing. You'll see that there's explain, describe, identify, and obviously that will help you know what level to go into. The other thing as a guideline is when you're completing your workbook for each one of these assessment criteria, the number of lines is no indication of how much you need to write. Far better indication of how much you need to write for each one is the marks available, not the number of lines. It's expected that you would just expand that writing as you write into the section. Okay, so let's get going with this first assessment criteria then. So explain the difference between leadership and management. So in a business, management and leadership are often grouped together, and the quantities that are attributed to leadership can also apply to managers. And often in this day and age, these terms get used interchangeably, but there is some difference between them, and for the purpose of this, you need to recognise that. So an effective manager should also be a leader, but a leader does not need to be a manager, or certainly not in a management role. Okay, so if you're going to have a management role within a business or within an organisation, you would expect to also display leadership attributes. You can lead lots of other teams without being in a management role. Sports teams, you know, any sort of group that needs a leadership, outdoors, you know, anything like that. That isn't a management role, but it may well be a leadership role. And obviously a successful business owner has to be both a strong leader and a good manager. It's all about getting the workforce to follow onto a vision, right? A good leader involves getting people to understand and believe in your vision in order to achieve goals, whereas management is much more focused on the day-to-day administration of the team and how they get to achieve the goals through administration, through day-to-day tasks. So there is some difference between the two. All right, let's have a little bit more look at the two. So managers are defined as people who have people working for them. Leaders are people who follow them or have people who follow them. So the difference here is obviously you work for your manager, you aspire to follow your leader. All right. Secondly, managers will control and direct the workforce, usually through policies and principles, things like that. You know, you will do what you're told by your manager because they're your manager and you have to do that. A leader, however, does a similar thing, but they do it through inspiration and motivation. So yes, you're still following your leader and probably doing what they ask you to do, but you're doing it because they've inspired you and motivated you to work towards the goal rather than telling you you have to do the goal. So the difference there is direction versus inspiration and motivation. Key skills that managers are going to use are planning and building in order to direct. Okay, leaders on the other hand will focus on changes and aims, again to motivate and inspire. So again, it's a key difference between the skills and the aspirations. So let's look at the functions of managers in a little bit more detail. Key thing here is managers are said to have 4 key functions. It doesn't really matter which way you look at them, there's no order for them as such. The first one we're going to look at is leading. So a manager inspires others to work hard to ensure the completion of the task. Like we said, there is some leadership in management. Good managers should also be good leaders. So if you're a good manager, you will have that leadership function within your role. There is a bit of a crossover. They will also be planning. So a manager is all about setting the objectives, whether that be your day-to-day objectives or your long-term strategic objectives. They need to be set for the business and or the team. And managers are also going to be the ones who determine how those objectives are set. So they may well be breaking them down into the day-to-day. Organising is all about managers organising resources. All right. These can be physical resources such as raw materials, personnel, location, all of those sort of things. In any resource which is needed for the aim or the goal of the business to be met, a manager will have that function. It's their role to get all of those resources working together so that the organisation can meet its goal. And the last key function is all about control. Okay, so they will control the team by setting goals. Quite often if you work in a business, you'll have a performance review with your manager. It's all about controlling what you're doing, making sure everyone's heading in the same direction, any goals that are set you're achieving, and that comes under that control. If you're not achieving them, it'll also be the manager's task to put some controls in place to either help you meet them or command you to meet them. Okay. 2 key types of theory that were put forward by a theorist called McGregor. And this is where we kind of look at management from 2 key perspectives. The first one of these is what we call Theory X managers. Now, there's a number of things there which Theory X managers do, but to sort of summarise what Theory X managers are looking for is to be in control. They're in charge. All right, workers wouldn't really be involved in the decision making. Theory X managers believe money is the only motivator, so the only reason people go to work is for money. All right, they don't think workers are particularly ambitious and they're going to need close supervision. All right. The opposite of that is a Theory Y manager. Now, Theory Y managers recognise that there's a lot more to motivating your workforce than just through money. You know, it could be flexible working time, it could be other reward systems, financial benefits other than just your pay. It also recognises that actually workers enjoy being in work, and as such, if we train them and offer them opportunities, that just enhances that enjoyment. They'll be more efficient if we give them responsibility, so we don't need the close supervision because, you know, give them the responsibility and that will help motivate them and get them to achieve the goals that way. So the key difference there is recognising that Theory X Workers are lazy, unmotivated, need close supervision. Theory Y, motivated by a variety of reasons, wanting to be in work, want to learn, and wanting to be ambitious. Give them a little bit more autonomy and they'll be a lot happier. So functions of leadership then, as opposed to functions of management. Like we said, the first key one here is to motivate and inspire. All right. Leaders are all about energizing the team, inspiring individuals through empowerment and striving to meet unmet needs. All right. The second one is the leader will create a vision for the team to aspire to. So yes, a leader will still provide direction, but they're not commanding you in a particular direction. They're just going to give you the vision and inspire you to reach that vision. So provide you with a direction. A cohesive team is always going to need a direction. So whether you're the leader or the manager, you have to be pushing that team in a certain direction. And the last one is making sure that the leader is aligning people to make sure that everyone's doing the right task, the task that suits them, that suits their personality. All right, the task which suits maybe their experience within the team and within the task they're being given. All right, so you can kind of see, if you look at these functions and refer them back to your theory X and theory Y, you would expect a theory Y manager to be displaying much more of these sort of warm feeling functions of leadership. A theory X manager would be doing much more of the functions of management without necessarily the functions of leadership built in. Okay. So at this point, that's the end of the sort of theory, if you like, to help you complete your assessment criteria 1.1, which is to explain the difference between leaderships and management. If you want to just pause this for a minute at this point, there's a couple of other resources in Moodle which will help you and help fill out some of those things we've been discussing. So I suggest before you start trying to complete your 1.1 assessment, watch the video on leadership and management. There's also a leadership and management quiz that you can take just to consolidate your learning and make sure that you understand the difference between the two roles. It's up to you whether you want to write up that assessment criteria before you move on to the rest of the video, or if you want to just keep going through the video and then do all the criteria at once. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so if we are moving on to activity 1.2, and this is looking at why leadership is important within your own team. All right, so I think the key thing here is you need to recognise a team which you have preferably led, but certainly been involved in. A work team would be easier and would be better for you to do. It could be a team that you led voluntarily in a business. It doesn't have to be a paid business, paid employment, but at some point in the past, a team, or currently a team that you have looked at and led. So key things for this then is understanding why creating an effective team is only possible with excellent leadership. And there's a number of reasons why then that we want that leadership and why it's important. The first one of those is actions. A leader will lead by example. They're responsible for ensuring that policies and plans are communicated so that the team knows where to start. A leader can't inspire action if the team doesn't know what it's doing. So it's up to the leader to A, lead by example, and B, make sure the team knows what it's doing. Motivation also would come from the leader. The leader can provide financial and non-financial rewards to get the team on board and make sure they're progressing. Financial rewards would be things like your wage or your salary. Non-financial rewards could be flexible working hours. It could be perks, you know, maybe discounts on company products. Childcare, anything like that would be classed as non-financial rewards. Okay. Good leadership is also important so that the team has guidance. Okay, yes, a team leader may well take a supervisory role, but over and above that, they're going to provide help and guidance and instruction. If you don't have that, the team again won't really know which direction it's heading in, and it certainly won't work as an effective, cohesive team. You'll have people pulling in all different directions. So the guidance of the team leader is important to make sure that the team reaches its goals. The fourth aspect, which is important for good leadership and a team, is that the team leader needs to provide the members with confidence. They need to make the team believe the goal is achievable, obviously making sure it is achievable. The goal can be inspirational. All right, we're not saying that it shouldn't be challenging for the team, but it certainly needs to be achievable for the team. Otherwise, it won't build the confidence and it won't be inspirational. You'll just end up with a team that thinks, why am I bothering? And then you're going to have all sorts of problems with cohesion and efficiency. So this is all about building the team's confidence, making sure they know they can achieve that that goal, with the guidance, with the motivation, with the direction and the other things we've looked at above. Get them to believe that goal can be achieved. Also all about morale, right? Make sure that everybody's happy working in the team. If people are, again, not happy, if they lose morale, the team is very difficult to get going in the right direction. Again, this will be where the team starts to fragment and break apart, and it'll just be really difficult to get working. And the last thing is the team leader needs to make sure that they are coordinating everybody in the team, making sure everyone's doing the right role, got the resources that they need to achieve that role, and they're moving on towards what they need to do. So the key thing when you're looking at this is you're trying to look at the benefits to the team of working together. And again, look at those within a team you've looked at. Can you identify in your work team where the motivation came from, how the team leader or how you gave your team guidance? Okay, work this into how you work with your team. For a good pass at this criteria, you need to link in those aspects to potentially leadership theorists and how they help develop cohesion within a team. So I've pulled out 3 key theorists for you to have a look at, and there are some links here for you to have a look at these in a little bit more detail, but I'll just quickly go through each of them so you've got a little bit more idea of what's going on. So Adair, this was a theory that was developed in the 1960s. As it says, it's based around 3 interlocking areas, and those interlocking areas are the task, the individual and the team. And it's all about what sort of actions do we need to have to get those 3 areas working together. So a leader is focusing on those 3 things. What actions does a leader need to do in those 3 areas to get them all working towards that cohesive team, that goal that we're striving towards? Okay, so when we're looking at the task part, it's about making sure that the resources are available, actions, identify it, communicate it, all of those sort of things would be making sure that task is achieved. And then the individual is about managing the individual. Different people need maybe different ways of management, different leadership ways to get them to get going, you know, to motivate them. So get to know the individual. What is motivating them? Why are they at work? What are they hoping to achieve? You know, what are their aspirations? If you can understand your individual, you've got much more chance of being able to get them inspired and motivated to that goal. And the last one then is the team, and that's all about actions involved in making the team work as a whole. So give the right roles to the right people. Make sure that there's, you know, cohesion between the team. If there's friction occurring, how do you work out the friction, eliminate the friction or reduce it? All of those sort of things. All right, so that's Adair's 3 interlocking areas. Tuckman is looking much more at, like it says, development, maturity of the team. So Tuckman is basically following on how the team develops from formation of the team through to the completion of the task. And it's looking at the relationship between the team leader and how maybe that leadership style needs to change as the team matures and works through its formation. Okay. And then Belbin is based, as it says here, around key roles within the team. All right. So this is all about making sure that you assign the right role to the right team member. And this is based on the understanding that if the team member has the right role, they're going to be much more efficient, much more effective. They're going to be happier working, so motivation will be high. And again, if you look at the link here, it outlines the roles and the sort of tasks that that team member will then undertake. Okay, so what I would do at the moment here is pause the PowerPoint here and then have a look at these links, have a good read, and make sure that you can then complete and understand those theories. If you can use those theories in your answer, you'll be much closer to a good pass. So just to run through how this could work for putting together your writing for that assessment criteria, I want you to think about a team that you're currently working in or have been a member of recently, preferably a workplace team and a volunteer situation, but if necessary, a sports team, any sort of team will do. First thing to do, I think, is to start thinking about the goals of the team. All right. Identify what the goal was, and it's much easier to see how the leader was helping people achieve that goal. Okay. Once you've got those sort of identified in your head, you need to be looking at things such as, was a certain type of task always given to the same person? If you think about, did you always ask one person to go and do some research? Did you always ask one person to come up with ideas? Right? That may, in your writing, be a link into Belbin. Can you identify the roles that Belbin identified within team members and certain tasks given to that member because of that role? Another way you can pull some of these theorists in is look at the different strategies as the team was developing. If you were in that team from day one and working with it all the way through to the completion of the task, can you think of different strategies? How did they change over time? How did the dynamics change? Okay, and again, can you fit any of those changes into suggestions that Tuckman was making? Did those dynamics change with the different tasks? Okay, did your leader maybe, inspire different individuals in different ways, which would be looking at the individual circle of Adair? Maybe you can pull it in that way. All right, so if you look at these questions and try and answer these questions, that will help you formulate your answer for assessment criteria 1.2. And if you can be pulling in those theorists as well, you'll be getting much closer to a good pass rather than just a pass for that criteria. Okay. So that is outcome 1.1, outcome 1 completed. So we now move on to outcome 2. And the first assessment criteria in outcome 2 is looking at different leadership styles. So like it says, your command word here is describe. So please make sure that when you are giving me your answer for 1.2 that you actually give enough information to make sure there's a description there. Again, if you're not sure, have a look at your mark scheme. Okay, your mark scheme here will give you the details of what you need to do for each level of a pass. All right, so that will give you a little bit more detail. There's 5 key leadership styles we're going to look at for this. If you do a Google search or something like that for leadership models and leadership styles, there's a lot more than just the 5, but for the purpose of this I'm going to focus on the 5 that we have listed here. So you have autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire, bureaucratic and paternalistic. Okay, So these are the 5 we're going to focus on. In order to get a pass or a good pass, you need to make sure you can focus on at least 3 of these. If you want a good pass, you need to be focusing on more than 3. Okay, so let's have a look at each one of these in a little bit more detail. So if we work through these in a little bit more detail, we have autocratic. Okay, and autocratic is sometimes called authoritarian, so you know the names are interchangeable. This is basically a leadership style where the leader tells the team what to do and how to do it. Okay, it's very directive. There's very little discussion of the goal or the methods. In fact, there'll be virtually no discussion. You would probably find a new leader, someone who's inexperienced maybe in how to lead a team, or a Theory X manager is much more likely to adopt an autocratic style of leadership. It sounds quite strict, and it is, but it does have its advantages. If you need to make a quick decision, maybe in an emergency situation, or something's changed very quickly and you need to change the team direction very quickly, you haven't got time to open it up for discussion. It may just be a case of you have to do it this way and you've got to do it now, and that's the way it's going to be done. There's nothing wrong with adopting that style of leadership if it's right for the situation and for the team. You might have team members who are inexperienced or maybe don't have much work ethos, are quite demotivated, lack any direction. Again, an autocratic leader can be very good at getting those people heading in the right direction. Big drawbacks from it, however, obviously if the team is a motivated team, it could lead to resentment, you know, constantly being told what to do, their ideas not being taken into account. And this could lead to low motivation. Okay. Second one to look at in a little bit more detail is democratic leadership styles. So a democratic leader is someone who will ask the team for input. The final decision still stays with the leader, with the manager. Okay, but the team gives their ideas, gives their opinions. So you're likely to have quite a lot more face-to-face meetings. There's going to be quite a lot of two-way communication. Feedback is going to be there. Decisions are going to take longer, because if you're going to open things up to discussion, it's going to take longer. And if you have a very large team, this can actually become quite difficult to manage. You know, trying to make sure that everyone has their right say, but keep the team focused and keep the meeting focused could be quite difficult. And it can also be if you sort of take one idea on board and not another idea as a leader, then maybe the person whose idea you've rejected becomes a bit demotivated and sort of thinks, well, you know, why was their idea better than mine? So you might need to, as a leader, make sure you're explaining things, which again elongates that decision-making process. Generally, though, the team is likely to be more motivated and more committed to the task and the goal. They've had an input into the task or the goal, therefore they take ownership of it. They're going to be more motivated to achieve it. The third style is a style called laissez-faire, or leave alone in French. And basically here the leader gives the main objective and then kind of stands back and leaves it up to the team to decide how they're going to achieve the goal. This works really well in creative teams. So, you know, teams that you may be working in advertising, promotions, where people are coming with lots of different ideas. And or high levels of specialisation is needed. You know, if you have a team where the task is very specialised, maybe the leader doesn't have that specialised knowledge. So you need your team to be coming up with their ideas, because you need their input, their knowledge to achieve that goal. Very motivating for team members who like a lot of responsibility, but obviously because you're leaving how to achieve the goal to the team, you might end up with quite a significant number of errors. The also problem with this is if the goal hasn't been communicated clearly by the leader, you're going to have confusion from day one. So the chances of the team achieving the goal is reduced straight away because they're not even heading in the right direction. And don't forget, the team leader is standing back. They're not really involved, laissez-faire, leave alone. So the team will be heading off in the wrong direction purely because they've not been given a clean goal. Again, if the team isn't working as a cohesive whole, how are you going to ensure that they're all sort of heading in the right direction? Who's having the main leadership idea? And you might well find that you get like a sub-leader emerging within the team, and that kind of defeats the point of laissez-faire leadership. The fourth one we're looking at is paternalistic. Now, paternalistic is it says it's similar to autocratic leaders, and they are, as in they make all the decisions, but it does have some involvement from democratic, and quite often they get crossed over between the two, paternalistic and democratic. This tends to be a little bit more like when someone's trying to be democratic but not actually taking on board anybody's ideas. So you ask for somebody's ideas but then end up doing your own thing anyway as a leader. Okay, so what you're doing is you persuade the employees that the decisions are in their best interest. So you ask for their ideas, but you've got your own that you're going to be putting in place. But one of the key things with a paternalistic leader, and the name kind of gives it away, if you look at the word paternalistic, the root word is paternal. So what they have is they do have their welfare of their employees at heart, okay, and they're really keen on making sure that the welfare of the employee is paramount. So looking after them, taking them under their wing, and hence, you know, there is this concern about being everybody's interest being considered, but actually the ultimate decision is still with the leader. And the last of the 5 that we're going to look at is paternalistic. Okay, is bureaucratic. Bureaucratic leaders are focused on specialisation within jobs and department, and you find these within organisations which are very formal in their hierarchy, and by that I mean the manager has very distinct roles. You're going to have maybe a second in charge, a supervisor, and you have this very clear hierarchical structure, and your job role is defined by where you are in that hierarchy. Okay, employees are allowed to use discretion, so they can use their own ideas, but only within very defined limits of their job role. So, you know, you can't really step out of your role as it's defined in that hierarchy. Team members are clear on what the task is, it's well defined, and you also tend to do the same tasks repeatedly, so you get much quicker at them. One of the big drawbacks of bureaucratic is it does discourage innovation or ability to adapt and change. Okay, so people get very stuck in their ways, very clear on how they're doing things. Okay, so in order to help you complete and understand those in a little bit more detail, what I recommend you do at this point is go back again to Moodle, and there's a couple of extra resources on there to help you achieve this assessment criteria. There's a video on leadership styles. There's some extra notes which are being pulled across from an organisation called Tutor2You, so feel free to download and have a read of those. And there's also a drag and drop activity which will help test your understanding and the key characteristics for each of those 5 leadership styles. Okay, so assessment criteria 2.2. Identify the most commonly used leadership style or styles within an organisation. Now, the key thing with this assessment criteria is it has to be within an organisation that you know about, or a team that you know about. So this has to be applied to team and a team situation. So the way to go about this one is think about an organisation that you know, or a team within that organisation. So maybe one you've led, or one you've worked in. It may be formal or informal, and again, like we've looked at before, if you're struggling to think of any specific work or voluntary team, maybe think of a social team or a sports team that you've been a member of. Out of the 5 styles that we looked at for assessment criteria 2.1, I want you to think about which of the 5 styles is the most common used within that team. And then come up with examples of situations or behaviours to provide a context for your leadership, for your decision. So if you've decided that the vast majority of what you see is bureaucratic, then give me some examples as to why you've decided it's bureaucratic. Is it because the organisation you worked in was very hierarchical? There were very clearly defined what you were and weren't allowed to do. All right. Was it maybe genuinely democratic in that you regularly had lots of face-to-face meetings, or you were asked for your feedback and there was clear evidence that any ideas and feedback were taken into consideration and used in the formation of ideas going forward? So make sure that whichever one you decide as the most commonly used leadership style, you can come up with examples and situations to explain that. And it may well be that actually there is no one that stands out. It may well be, 2 or 3 which are commonly used, because at the end of the day, there is no one best leadership style. And a good leader will adapt and change styles depending on different situations. So here, where we've sort of said look at different situations, it may well be that in a common thread of situation, one style is obvious, but if that situation changes, you start to realise that another style became predominant. And if you're working towards a good pass, you do need to recognise that actually those styles may well change as situations change. Okay. So, moving on to activity or assessment 2.3. So explain the likely effect this leadership style has on the team's performance. Now, the key thing with 2.3 is it says this leadership style is referring back to the leadership style you've identified in 2.2. So whichever one or two that you identified as the common usage one in 2.2 are the ones you need to look at in 2.3. Okay, and what you're trying to do here is you're trying to create a cause and effect link with examples. So using whichever ones you chose, what was the cause and what was the effect? So what was the effect on the team performance? So for example, if we're using autocratic and your leadership style was to give out orders, was that effective on team performance because actually it meant they had clear goals, they knew exactly where they were heading, people knew what they were doing, things were clear, and that goal was easily achieved, and the process the process towards the goal was identified. Okay, so you've got to take each one here that you looked at in 2.2 and think about the impact on the team's performance. Now the table on the following page, this one, gives you some ideas of the positives and negatives of each of those styles. So you can have a read through some of those, pick out the one that you identified in 2.2 and make sure then that that is linking through maybe as to why those effects on performance and effectiveness. So you're looking here to create a piece of writing that links the common used leadership style and how the cause and effect has made the team's performance better or worse, because it could have had a negative impact as well as a positive impact on performance, and also what impact that had on effectiveness. So the last assessment criteria for this unit then is a reflection basically of your own leadership style and potential impact on the team. So this is assessment criteria 2.4. Remember here that there is no right or wrong leadership style to adopt. All right, the right or wrong leadership style to adopt depends on the situation, depends on the team you're leading, depends on your personality. So, you know, don't feel that you need to be choosing one or the other because there's a right or a wrong answer. There is no right or wrong leadership style to choose for this. Okay. You may well find that within your role as a leader, you had a dominant style, and then you had other styles that you brought in different situations. That's absolutely fine. If that's your reflection, then so be it. That's what you discuss. Did you maybe have a dominant style and adopt a different leadership style for different team leaders? Team members. As I say, if you had a team member who was quite demotivated or had personal problems, you might have adopted different leadership styles there. Maybe autocratic for the one that needed more supervision, more control, maybe paternalistic for the one who was suffering from personal problems and needed much more welfare guidance in order to get them to be an effective member of the team. So the key thing to do with this is focus on you as a leader. Okay, so how you identified which type of leadership style was used and the potential impact had on your team. So the key thing here is making sure you contextualize what you're saying into you and your team. Like we said, if you're wanting a good pass here, you might be recognizing that there were secondary styles that were adopted for different situations, different teams, different team members. And again, explain why that was different and why that choice was made. A couple of things on Moodle that might help you with this is there's an ILM handout on there which is called Spotlight on Leadership Styles. That will help you complete a worksheet which is on there, and both of those things will help identify maybe your own leadership style. And finally, at the end of the unit, there is a revision quiz which pulls the whole unit together. So feel free to do the revision quiz and consolidate and check your understanding. As I say, if you're doing each assessment criteria as you go, this will be your last one. If you've just worked through the PowerPoints and you're now looking to start the assessment criteria, feel free to go back and look at each one individually and then get going. Please remember the lines are only guidance. Write as much as you need to write to get a good answer. All right. If you need any help, please contact your tutor. That's what they're there for. They'll give you any help and guidance, clarify anything that you're still not too clear on. Good luck. I look forward to reading your submission.